An American war veteran crossed the Atlantic to attend the funeral of a German woman whose name had never appeared in a history book, and when he placed his old wristwatch beside her coffin, the people inside the church turned toward him in confusion. The watch was scratched, faded, and held together by a narrow leather strap that had darkened with age. It had survived the final months of World War II, a winter in an occupied village, and nearly 40 years on his wrist. Yet the veteran removed it without hesitation. Then the pastor unfolded a letter tied with a blue ribbon and read the first line aloud. "Anna, if I do not return, my son will have no one left but you." The pastor stopped. In the front pew sat a gray-haired man who had once been that frightened child. The story had begun in the spring of 1945, when Germany was collapsing and every road seemed to lead toward another ruined town. Anna Keller was 31 years old and worked in the kitchen of a small field hospital outside Würzburg. Before the war, she had taught children to read. By then, the school had been damaged, her parents were gone, and the rooms where children once practiced handwriting had become a place for injured soldiers and displaced families. Among the medics working there was Lucas Hartmann, a widower Anna had known since childhood. His wife had died during an air raid 2 years earlier, leaving him to raise their 8-year-old son, Emil. When Lucas was assigned to the hospital, Emil stayed nearby in the cellar of an abandoned school with several other children. Anna often brought him soup, repaired his clothes, and listened while he described the home he hoped to see again. One evening, Lucas found Anna behind the hospital washing blood from metal bowls with water that had already turned cold. He looked exhausted, but there was urgency in his voice. "The unit is leaving before sunrise," he told her. "I have been ordered east." Anna stopped working. Everyone knew what such orders could mean. Lucas placed an envelope on the table. It was addressed to his older sister, Margareta, who lived in southern Bavaria. Inside were Emil's birth papers, the last known address, and a letter written in Lucas's careful handwriting. "If I do not come back, take Emil to her," he said. "Do not let him believe I chose to leave him." Anna looked toward the dark doorway. "Why are you asking me?" "Because he trusts you," Lucas answered, "and because I do too." Anna wanted to tell him she had no money, no safe route, and no authority to move a child across military checkpoints. She wanted to remind him that trains had stopped running and bridges had been destroyed. But Lucas was not asking whether the journey would be easy. He was asking whether his son would be alone. Anna closed her hand around the envelope. "I will find a way," she said. 3 days later, Lucas's unit disappeared during the retreat. No official report followed, no body was returned. Anna waited until darkness, then crossed the damaged town and entered the cellar of the abandoned school. Emil sat beneath a broken window holding a small wooden horse. When he saw her, he stood. "Did my father send you?" Anna knelt in front of him and held out the envelope. "Yes," she said, "and I made him a promise." The following weeks tested every promise Anna had ever believed she was strong enough to keep. Food had become more valuable than money, and every decision seemed to demand another sacrifice. Each morning before sunrise, she walked nearly 3 miles to nearby villages carrying whatever possessions remained from her old life. One day she traded her mother's silver hairbrush for 2 loaves of dark bread. Another day she exchanged her winter coat for dried potatoes and a small bottle of cooking oil. She never told Emil how much those things had meant to her. She only smiled whenever there was enough food for him to finish a meal without pretending he was already full. The journey to Bavaria could not begin immediately. The railway lines had been damaged in several places, military checkpoints still divided the region, and civilians traveling with children without official guardianship papers were often turned back for their own safety. Every evening Anna unfolded the map Lucas had once marked with a pencil. She searched for roads that no longer appeared blocked and wrote down the names of villages where churches or relief stations might offer temporary shelter. Progress came one small piece at a time, but she refused to let hope disappear faster than the roads reopened. Emil rarely complained. At night he kept the wooden horse beside his pillow and sometimes asked questions that no child should ever have needed to ask. "Do you think my father was afraid?" Anna looked into the fire for a long moment before answering. "I think he loved you more than he feared anything else." The boy accepted the answer quietly. He never asked whether his father was still alive. Somehow, He already understood that hope and certainty were not always the same thing. One cool morning, Anna and Emil arrived at an American relief station where families lined up to receive food, medical care, and travel documents. Behind a wooden table stood Sergeant William Carter, a 26-year-old logistics officer from Ohio. Unlike many soldiers, his daily work no longer involved combat. Instead, he spent his days helping reunite separated families, registering displaced civilians, and directing refugees toward relatives whenever records could be verified. William noticed Anna immediately, not because she looked suspicious, but because she looked exhausted. Her clothes had been repaired so many times that almost every patch came from a different piece of fabric. Yet despite her own condition, she placed Emil at the front of the line before accepting anything for herself. When their turn arrived, William examined their papers carefully. Anna's identification was complete, but Emil's documents carried a different surname. "You are not his mother," William said gently. "No. Are you a relative?" "No." William looked up. "Then why are you traveling together?" Instead of answering immediately, Anna untied the faded blue ribbon around Lucas's envelope and placed it on the table. William hesitated before opening it. Inside, he found Emil's birth certificate, the address of Lucas's sister in Bavaria, and a letter written only days before Germany surrendered. He read the opening lines slowly. "If this letter reaches you, then I have already entrusted my greatest responsibility to Anna Keller. Please help her take my son to my sister. If I cannot return, let Emil grow up believing that his father loved him until his final day." William lowered the letter without speaking. During the war, he had read countless military reports filled with numbers, casualties, and supply requests. None of them had ever carried the weight of those few handwritten sentences. He reached for the watch on his wrist, checking the time before remembering there was nowhere more important he needed to be. Closing his notebook, he looked back at Anna. "I cannot promise the roads will be safe," he said, "but I can help you find the safest ones still open." For the first time in many months, Anna allowed herself to believe that keeping her promise might no longer depend on her strength alone. Over the next several months, William kept his word. Whenever his duties brought him near Anna's village, he stopped to share the latest information gathered from military engineers, railway officials, and relief agencies. He marked newly repaired bridges on Anna's map, warned her about roads still crowded with abandoned military equipment, and wrote down the addresses of churches known for sheltering displaced families. He never treated her as someone waiting to be rescued. Instead, he respected that she had already carried the hardest burden long before he had entered her life. One afternoon, William arrived carrying a small cloth bundle instead of paperwork. Inside was a pair of sturdy boots that had belonged to an American medic returning home. "You'll need these more than he does now," William said. Anna hesitated. "I cannot repay you." "You already have," he replied. "You reminded me that the strongest people I met during this war were not always the ones wearing uniforms." That evening, Emil slipped the boots beside Anna's bed before falling asleep. She understood the quiet message without a single word being spoken. By early autumn, encouraging news finally arrived. A refugee registration office in southern Germany had located Margareta Hartmann, Lucas's older sister. For months, she had searched church records, hospitals, and relief agencies, hoping to find her missing nephew. Every description she provided matched Emil perfectly. Anna read the letter several times before folding it carefully into Lucas's envelope. The promise she had carried for so many months was no longer a distant hope. It had become a destination. The journey south took nearly a week. Passenger trains moved slowly across damaged tracks, often stopping for hours while engineers cleared debris or repaired bridges. When trains could go no farther, travelers continued on foot or climbed onto crowded military trucks heading in the same direction. Every mile reminded them that Europe was rebuilding itself one broken road at a time. William obtained the travel permits Anna and Emil needed to pass through the remaining checkpoints legally. Before they departed, he removed the worn wristwatch from his arm and compared its time with the station clock. "It has kept me on schedule since France," he said with a faint smile. "Now I hope it keeps the three of us on time for something better." Emil stared at the scratched watch. "Will you still have it when I am grown up?" William fastened it back onto his wrist. I believe so. Some things are worth carrying for a lifetime. Those words remained with Emil long after the train disappeared beyond the station. Late one afternoon, they finally reached a small railway platform surrounded by rolling hills already touched by autumn colors. A woman stood near the end of the platform, clutching an old photograph so tightly that its edges had curled with age. She searched every face stepping off the train until her eyes settled on the little wooden horse Emil carried beneath his arm. For a brief moment, no one moved. Then Margareta whispered his name. Emil. The boy looked back at Anna. His face carried both excitement and uncertainty. Anna rested her hands on his shoulders. Go, she said softly. She has been waiting for you just as long as you have been waiting for her. Emil ran forward. Margareta dropped to her knees and embraced him with tears she had held back for months. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Words could wait. The embrace itself answered every question the war had left behind. When Emil finally returned to Anna, he wrapped his arms around her as tightly as he could. Will I ever see you again? Anna smiled through tears that she no longer tried to hide. I hope so, she answered. But whether we meet again or not, never forget something important. What is it? Your father never abandoned you. He spent his last days making sure someone would bring you home. Emil nodded. He carefully untied the blue ribbon from Lucas's letter, then tied it around the little wooden horse before placing both into his aunt's hands. Anna watched them walk away together until they disappeared beyond the station. Only then did she allow herself to cry. Her promise had ended, but the life it protected was only beginning. Nearly 4 decades passed before William Carter saw Anna Keller again. Europe had rebuilt its cities. Children born after the war now raised families of their own. The ruins that had once filled newspaper photographs had disappeared beneath new homes, schools, and churches. Yet every autumn, when the air grew cool and the leaves began turning gold, William found himself thinking about a woman who had quietly taught him that courage could exist without medals, speeches, or recognition. Over the years, he and Anna exchanged only a handful of letters. They never wrote about the war itself. Instead, Anna shared the ordinary milestones that Lucas had hoped his son would one day reach. Emil had finished school. He had studied engineering. He had married. Later came another letter saying he had become the father of a little girl who loved listening to stories about trains and wooden horses. Every letter ended the same way. He is living the life his father wanted him to have. That is enough. William kept every one of those letters in a small wooden box beside the worn wristwatch he had carried since 1944. Whenever he opened the box, he was reminded that history often celebrated the people who won battles while quietly overlooking those who kept a single promise alive long after the fighting had ended. Then, one rainy October morning, another envelope arrived. This time the handwriting belonged to Emil. Anna had grown seriously ill during the previous winter. Age had finally taken the strength from the woman who had spent so much of her life carrying others. At the end of the letter, Emil added only one sentence. If you can come, I believe she would be happy knowing you still remembered. William booked the first flight he could find. When he arrived in Germany, Emil was waiting outside the small stone church. His hair had turned silver, but the calm kindness in his eyes reminded William immediately of the little boy who had once clutched a wooden horse on a crowded train. They embraced without saying much. Some friendships did not need many words. Inside the church, Anna rested peacefully beneath simple white flowers. There were no television cameras, no military honor guard, no politicians, only family, neighbors, and a few people whose lives had quietly crossed hers over the years. Beside the coffin rested the familiar blue ribbon, carefully wrapped around Lucas's final letter. William walked forward slowly. He looked once more at the watch that had measured every mile of his own journey since the war. It had reminded him when supply convoys departed, when refugee trains arrived, and when a frightened woman and a little boy had first stood before his desk asking for nothing except the chance to keep a father's promise. Without hesitation, he removed the watch from his wrist and placed it gently beside the blue ribbon. The pastor picked up Lucas's letter and opened it carefully. He read only the first sentence. Anna, if I do not return, my son will have no one left but you. The church fell completely silent. The pastor lowered the paper before continuing. Some promises belong only to the people who make them. This one belonged to Anna Keller. She asked for no reward, accepted no recognition, and expected no one to remember her name. Yet because she kept this promise, one frightened child became a loving father, then a grandfather, and generations of one family were given a future that almost disappeared in the final days of war. No one spoke. Many quietly wiped away tears. After the service, Emile remained beside the grave while the others slowly drifted toward the church gate. He picked up William's old wristwatch and held it carefully in both hands. "I cannot keep this," he said. William smiled. "I did not leave it for Anna." Emile looked at him with quiet surprise. "I left it for you." He gently closed Emile's fingers around the worn leather strap. "Your father trusted Anna. Anna trusted me. And now I trust you." Emile's eyes filled with tears. To do what? To remember. William glanced toward Anna's grave, where fresh autumn leaves had begun settling across the flowers. "One day," he said softly, "your grandchildren will ask how your family survived the war. Tell them about your father, tell them about your aunt, tell them about the people who chose compassion when hatred seemed easier. History remembers battles because they changed borders. Families remember promises because they changed lives." Emile nodded. "I will." As William walked away from the church, he did not look back. For the first time in nearly 40 years, his wrist felt strangely light. But his heart did not. Some people leave monuments behind. Others leave stories. Anna Keller left something even rarer. She left a promise that one ordinary person had the courage to keep, and because she did, generations of a family were able to live ordinary lives in a world that had once seemed determined to take them away. Long after wars fade into history books, that kind of courage continues to echo, quietly, faithfully, and forever.